Hello, I'm Billy, the Whisky Exchange's ambassador, and I'm here today joined by Jim Beveridge, who is a whisky technical specialist for Diageo, but people best know him as the master blender for Johnnie Walker. Hello, Jim. How are you doing today?
Hi, Billy. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. It's quite a different world we work in just now with all the COVID-19 and spending a lot more time at home than usual. But I still get a good chance to nose and taste whiskies.
Oh, that's the important bit. So, yeah. Anyway, so what I want to start talking about is about yourself and how did you get into the wonderful world of whisky?
Well, I first joined as a flavour chemist um, over 40 years ago. That's when it first started. And looking back, I was very lucky, very privileged to get involved in all aspects of flavour, but mostly at the time looking at new make flavours and the distilleries, and then getting into the distilleries and looking at how they work and how that could be related to the flavours that they make. And it was really, looking back now, it's pretty privileged to be able to do that. Going out to the distilleries, observing, taking samples, bringing them back, analysing them, and then having some wise thoughts around how the flavours are being made, and also being surrounded by an amazing team of very dedicated, scientists who are committed to this whole business of trying to understand how whiskey's made and the whole science and technology of whiskey making.
That's one of the things that people don't sort of think about quite so much is the fact that over the past, as you say, 40 years and beyond, people have been looking into actually what makes whiskey taste as it does. And, it no longer is there sort of more so much folklore, although there's lots of folklore in the whiskey world still. But have you seen that develop over time? Over the last 40 years, have you seen a lot more science go into the way that people make whiskey?
Yes, I would say that the science and technology part of whiskey making has become much more important across the whole industry. And if you look at the main experts across the industry, most of them will be scientists of some form or another, or engineers. And so their technical understanding has developed a lot and has been applied, I think, to great effect. And it will continue. There's some lots of great insights have come from that science and technology, and these are being applied today in very, very effective ways.
So, starting out as a flavour scientist, how did you move from that into sort of more working on, well, rather than just working out where the flavours come from, but working out how to bring those together as a blender?
Well, I must have spent about most of the 80s and beginning of the early 90s working, doing what I was saying, being the flavour, feel like the flavour chemist, looking at the distilleries, understanding the flavours, and then also looking at how they're maturing in wood. So, that was 10 plus years of delving into that. And throughout that period, it became increasingly obvious how important our senses are in determining flavours. So, on the one hand, I'm a chemist trying to understand the flavours chemically, but at the same time, also trying to understand the flavours and how they're expressed and how they work together. And I think increasingly, I moved more and more towards the flavour side of the work that I was doing, because that's the bit that really fascinated me. And then trying to link those flavours to the processes, how certain processes were accounted for certain of the flavours, and then that was then backed up by the chemical analysis as a kind of enabler behind that. So there's a kind of picture there that was slowly but surely taking more and more towards flavours and whiskies and how they're created, and then that moved more and more towards then how to combine them to create great expressions, great blends. So moving away from the lab more to the blending table, that then sort of, I'd say that began to evolve more in the early to mid 90s. That's when I started moving more towards that area.
So these days, you're the master blender for Johnnie Walker. So what does that involve on a sort of day-to-day basis? What does that? It's one of those roles which seems so very, very wide that I'm not entirely sure what it actually involves day to day.
Well, it's quite a technical role. I think there's three big areas that you could say that we look at as master blender. Well, first one is maintaining the quality and consistency of all the blends that we all know. Johnnie Walker Red Label, Johnnie Walker Black, Johnnie Walker Blue, all of those blends with a huge heritage and history behind them. There's a massive responsibility there to be at the forefront of ensuring the quality of those different blends as they're being produced today. So that's a really important role. And remember, I'm working with a team of fellow blenders, so a team of around 12 of us who are doing this. So that's the first bit, maintaining and ensuring the quality of the blends that we currently see. I think the other big area is innovation, thinking about new expressions, adapting to the way our consumers are seeing our whiskies, and thinking about how those expressions can evolve with the way they're being consumed. And so that's a really important area, is around innovation. And then the third area, and really important area, is thinking about the future. So it's making sure that the whiskies that are being laid down today, the new make whiskies and the wood, they are all, if you like, fit for purpose, so that when the whiskies, say for Johnnie Walker Black Label, when the whiskies emerge from the warehouses in 12 years' time, they'll be fit for purpose, and they'll be just exactly how they should be. So thinking about the future and making sure about what is being made today will be what's needed in the future. That's another important aspect. So three big areas: quality of the existing products, innovation, and making sure the stocks that we lay down now will be suitable for the future.
Over the past 40 odd years that you've been working in the whiskey world, you must have seen quite a lot of change. As you said, the science has changed quite a lot, but also the nature of blending and that side of things also seems to have changed. Back when you started, blended whiskey seems to have been the king. Single malts now get very much more of the press, but back then blends seem to have been the main, well, they're still the main part of the market, but they were even larger back then. How have you seen that and other things within Diageo and the various parts of companies that are now Diageo, as they've changed over the years? Have you seen the approach to blending change over time?
I think the blends themselves have been remarkably consistent. So if you think about Johnnie Walker Red Label, Johnnie Walker Black Label, massive heritage there, and we're very fortunate. We've got the archives to show us how the whiskies were made, if you like, from the beginning of the late 19th, early 20th century, and all the way through till now, the 21st century. So there are there's a great sense of consistency over that period, and the blends, their flavours, the kind of expressions that they are, there's a remarkable consistency throughout that period. I think sitting behind that consistency will be, and we talked about this earlier, about the insights around how to make them, and the use of more technical understanding which sits beneath that, and in a way is responding, reacting to current circumstances. So so the making of those blends has evolved and works around, if you like, current circumstances to maintain the quality and consistency of the blends throughout their lives. So that remains, and is a really important thing to remember, that consistency is there. And when we're thinking about the stocks for the future, it's exactly that we aim to ensure will happen over the coming years. So that's a thread that runs through the whole process and remains like that. And it was a bit like, when I first joined, that whole culture of making Johnnie Walker Red, Johnnie Walker Black, that culture remains, albeit our insights into how to make it have changed, and they've evolved with time as well. So that's the kind of sense of that. I think the other big piece that's changing So I think, in terms of the question, there's that consistent thread that's really important, and it's a big part of Johnnie Walker and all the other blends that we make. And I think across the whole category that will remain for the blends that we all know. I think also alongside that, there's been a great growth in consumer understanding. Our consumers are much more aware of the flavours that they like, aware of the different expressions of whiskies, and that's an increasingly important part of whisky making, is being able to understand our consumers. The malts revolution, I guess Glenfiddich led that initially, and gradually it's now increased. It's quite a relatively recent phenomenon. I mean, it's probably within the last, say, 20 years that it's really begun to really take off, and is hugely important. So that's an area that has changed, and so that means that, in a way, how we talk about malts affects the way we talk about blends. So we need to think about talking about our blends in similar ways as we're learning to talk about our malts.
Yeah, that growth in malts, as you say, by Glenfiddich and others who sort of grew that as a sort of more premium category, that led to sort of reaction again in the blends world, because, as you said, Johnnie Walker, Red and Black, where they have been these stalwarts of the blending industry for years and years. I have in my cupboard around the corner a 1970s bottle of Johnnie Walker Red Label. And as you say, you can see the thread still. You can see the similarities, and things change over time, obviously. But one of the sort of the landmark sort of releases, remember within Johnnie Walker, is Johnnie Walker Blue Label, which definitely came along and changed things a little bit, and changed a lot of people's approaches to blends. Were you working around on that launch of Blue Label, or what did you see around that and how it changed things?
I think the idea behind Johnnie Walker Blue Label was, at the time, was to create an expression, if you like, using the best that was in our warehouses. That was the kind of sense of what Johnnie Walker Blue Label was built around, and that this idea of in terms of the flavors that we had, the kind of unique expression of some of the amazing flavors that you can find in whiskey, and combining them into this blend, which was called Johnnie Walker Blue Label, and that has remained since, and I think it kind of raised the bar in terms of the way whiskey was being expressed, and that's kind of where it's gone to now. It's mostly around. It's best to think of it as a whiskey that's designed for a different kind of occasion than from, say, Johnnie Walker Red Label, Johnnie Walker Black Label, Johnnie Walker Blue Label. They're whiskies for different occasions, and Johnnie Walker Blue Label, the occasion for Johnnie Walker Blue Label is for special occasions, whether that's with friends and family, or to celebrate business successes or personal successes. That really was the motivation behind creating the blend Johnnie Walker Blue Label.
It went from being, as you say, Red Label and Black Label. They're for different occasions. They're much more towards the everyday occasions, and sort of like sort of normal whiskies. And there was definitely very much whiskey was like becoming an everyday sort of item, and Blue Label for me sort of seemed to raise the bar on those whiskies, as you say, and create this special occasion, which has had the knock-on effect now in the Johnnie Walker range as well, having these sort of higher level, more intricate blends and sort of more limited edition things as well. It's very much it's changed the market quite a lot, I feel. So thinking about that, and you're sort of saying, looking at the warehouses and finding the best. I remember a while back talking to you about launch of one of these special edition whiskies, and you're talking about the various different experimental casks that you've been able to use in it. Over time, through these sort of your experiments that you've been working on about flavors and things, you've obviously done lots of experiments. Are there any particular experiments you can tell us about that you've been working on over the past 40 years, or things that have sort of changed the way that people play with whiskey?
Well, in a way, experiments are the kind of are really critical to our whole whiskey making. And in a way, when I joined the company, I mean, I joined as a technical person who came from a background of experimentation, and we were certainly encouraged at that time to look at new ways of gaining new insights around our processes. And so experimentation has been really critical over the years. The experiments are in the way the whiskies are being made, the kind of flavors, the expressions that are being made, understanding how different distilleries work, and using that knowledge to create new expressions. And then also the wood is really important. So different casks, different activities of the wood, different wood treatments, finishing. There's a whole list of opportunities that lie within Scotch whisky. I mean, Scotch whisky has a huge advantage over other international whiskies in that there is that huge, even within the definition, there is a huge opportunity for diversity of flavour. We've got all these different malt distilleries, different grain distilleries, different kinds of wood. They all together give blending teams huge opportunities to create new expressions. And so it's with that massive palette that we're able to work with that. And you can see innovation being applied across the industry in many ways. So thinking about what would be the key innovations, the main thing, the critical thing about innovation is that it has to be done with a sense of where the consumer is. There's not a lot of point in experimenting just for the sake of it, just to create something that I might think is new and different. It's not really relevant. It's what's really relevant is what our consumers think, and it's thinking about creating expressions which they'll enjoy, and that's got to be the mantra behind the experimentation. So, in a way, Johnnie Walker Blue Label was an experiment to see just how that kind of expression would connect with our consumers, and it certainly has, and it works really well. And that would be one of the first major innovations in the sort of history of Johnnie Walker over the years. And there's a kind of tradition within the Walker heritage that innovation is part of what happens. Recently, I would say we went through a very exciting period about 4 or 5 years ago when we were doing different expressions. So we call them the blenders batch. The intention behind that was to showcase the, if you like, blending skills and the opportunities that lie within our stocks. And there was a number of expressions there that we created, and we learned a lot from them. And it was, for blenders, it was a really exciting time to be able to pull these thoughts together, create new expressions, and share them with our consumers. That was an exciting time. Perhaps the most recent innovations would be White Walker. I think that's quite a different style of whiskey, certainly marketed in a different kind of way as well. But the flavour profile of White Walker is quite different from other Johnnie Walker blends, and so that would be a more recent example of innovation with flavour, thinking about new kinds of occasions and how those can be, how we can create expressions that will work for different occasions. I think, I keep going.
Yeah.
I think also there's a lot of innovation taking place in the serves. So just looking at blends like Johnnie Walker Red Label, Johnnie Walker Black Label, there's a really groundswell of real expertise from the bartenders, creating new expressions, if you like, through cocktails, through different serves. I think that's a really exciting area, and there's a lot of innovation taking place around what would be our standard expressions of whiskey, but then being served in different kinds of ways. And I think that's a very, very, very interesting area to look at. It's almost like the the bartenders, the 14th member of the blending team, creating the, using the core flavours that we find in Johnnie Walker Red Label and Johnnie Walker Black Label, and expressing them in different ways through different serves.
Jumping back to the White Walker, you're saying that it's got a different flavour profile to most Johnnie Walker whiskies. How did it differ, and how did you approach sort of creating something that is so different?
Well, it always starts with these innovations always start with, if you like, with our consumers thinking about the kind of occasions they're enjoying our whiskies, and thinking about how we can use that, and that's really where it starts from. So Johnnie Walker, the White Walker, is much it's really from a much very high energy occasions, where it can be mixed with different mixers. That wonderful light expression of whiskey is great for mixing, and great for the kind of occasions which was felt that our consumers were looking to see expressions of whiskey which they would suit that. That was the thinking behind Johnnie Walker White Walker. In a way, bringing in consumers who haven't really experienced whiskey before. White Walker, you can imagine a completely different image there, and be pulling in those who've never really thought about whiskey before, and then showing them how whiskey can apply to the kind of occasions that they're enjoying, and make the connection.
So that leads into my main sort of thing that we want to be talking about. The thing which we're really interested in this year's show is, we're talking about whiskey being an ever-changing world, and we've already heard from you how it's changed a lot. But what do you see in the future? What do you see the upcoming changes that are currently coming through that will lead to? If you had a crystal ball, what would you predict?
The future. I think the interest in whiskey will remain and grow. That would be my sense of it. That that will still continue to be really important. And so it will be very much around trying to react to that growing interest in Johnnie Walker. So I think that's important. And I think the making of whiskey will be, as the world is changing around us, and so the making of whiskey will need to adapt to that as well. And I think that's going to be a really important area for whiskey making, is how it's being made in a manner that's sustainable for the environment, and that I think that's going to be a really important. So the makers of whiskey will need to react to those changes that will happen, and also, I'm sure, I'm great confidence in the consumers. They'll continue to enjoy whiskies. I think they'll continue to seek to know more about how whiskey's being made. As whiskey makers, we'll be more committed to explaining how the whiskies are being made, the ways the flavours are created, the ways we work. That will become important, growingly important, and the history and heritage of our brands will be hugely critical to our consumers, because they will become more and more interested and aware of how whiskies are being made. It's not amazing flavours, but also the stories behind the way the whiskies have been created. That's going to be an important part of how we talk about our whiskies.
And at the moment, as you say, you're always working on innovations. Are you still laying down new things? Are you still preparing for those new products for the future? Are there any interesting things you can tell us about that are down the line, or?
Well, yeah. The question is, yes, I'm constantly looking for new knowledge, constantly thinking about new ways, new expressions, thinking about, because our consumers their tastes are evolving and their interests are changing. So it's always being, always wanting to be able to think about how we react to that. I think there's maybe two big areas to think about for the future. One is the area we touched on with White Walker. I think that kind of expression of whiskies are really a really interesting area to be involved in. So certainly, and those kind of occasions are really important. So I think that will be an area that will definitely be worth looking at and continuing to seek insights around those different expressions in that kind of flavour space. So I think that's a very important area for whisky in the future. I think almost a completely different area will be in the area of we call it prestige, where there are some very amazingly special expressions of whisky are being created. And I think that area will also become, it's important today, and that the growth in that will be also very important to us. So, it's across the whole range of flavour expressions that we'll look to innovate. And it's really about thinking about occasions and making sure that we have expressions that will be fit for those different occasions when consumers can enjoy our whiskies.
Excellent. So more new things as ever, but at the same time, making sure we still have our old favourites, red label, black label, blue label, still coming along, still evolving as they need to. Anyway, Jim, thank you very much for having a chat with us today. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Thanks, Billy. It's been a great privilege and pleasure to talk to you. Wish you all the success.